it is to be with you this morning. I hope that you're having a wonderful Mother's Day, and I want to know how many people in here have the best mother. I mean, yeah, that's how it is, isn't it? We all have the best mother. There's a lot of best mothers in the world, just throwing that out there right now, because we all seem to have the best mother in the world. So mothers are precious and important, and let's face it, without mothers, none of us would be here this morning. So they're kind of important in the scheme of things, aren't they? You know, as I was thinking about that this week, I really started to picture in my mind who I am because of not just my mother, but because of my wife and the mother that she's been to my children, and what I've learned and observed in her interaction with our children. And as I began to think about those things, I began to think about my life in general and about who I am and the influences in my life that caused me to become the person that I am. And a large part of that in my life, and I hope in yours, I hope that you had that type of mother. I hope that was in your life, that was an influence in you and in who you became. And even as we get older, we still maybe rely upon some of that guidance and knowledge and wisdom that was imparted to us at a very young age as we were growing and maturing and becoming who we would become. You know, I've often thought about influence, and in Ezekiel, and this is kind of an interesting analogy, if you want to look at it that way, that Ezekiel's using, and really the mother here is talking about Jerusalem or Judah. But it's an interesting thought. He says, your mother was like a vine in your vineyard, planted by the waters. It was fruitful and full of branches because of abundant waters, and it had strong branches fit for scepters of rulers. And its height was raised above the clouds, so that it was seen in its height with the mass of its branches. And as you think about that passage, and especially verse 11, you see in here it has strong branches fit for the scepters of rulers. And I always thought that's a really neat analogy, a really neat thought, because, you know, as we have children in our lives and we have that baby, and if you've ever had a child and had that experience, and I think when you hold that child for the first time, you always think of the potential of that child, don't you? You know, any parent that holds a child, they think, oh, that child's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a president or a whatever. You know, we always see potential in them, don't we? See potential in that child we hold. And as parents, I think that's natural for us to do that. We never hold a child in our arms and think, oh, well, that child's going to be a drug dealer or that child's going to be a murderer. We don't think that, do we? Because we see this glorious potential within that child, and that's what a child is. A child's full of potential, full of possibility, full of hopes and dreams and a life that's yet to be lived. And in that glorious thought of childhood, and of we have a part as a parent, and mothers have a tremendous part in how that happens. But it all starts there, doesn't it? It all starts there. You know, there's a painting, Starry, Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, and maybe you know this painting. It's kind of a favorite of mine. I don't know why. And it's worth a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how much, more than I have. It's worth a lot of money. But I always kind of ponder it. And I think, why is it worth so much? I mean, it's just paint on a board, right? Or whatever it is, canvas, whatever he used, I don't know. But it's just paint on there. And I always think about that. And I think, why is that worth so much? And I think, well, because for one thing, it's who created it, right? I mean, it's kind of this guy, you know, if you know the story of Vincent van Gogh, and it's kind of who created it. And the other thing I think is because it's very unique. You know, there's not another one like it in the world. I mean, you can make duplicates, you can make replicates, but there's not another one of those in the entire world. And you know, when a mother gives birth to a child, that child has so much value because, for one thing, who created it, right? You know, all those things come from God, don't they? God creates life. God gives us that ability and gives us that potential to do that. But that baby's unique. There'll never be another child like the child that mother creates. There's never going to be another one. That's one of a kind, one and only one. But as I thought about this painting, I thought, one interesting thing about it is that it all started with one brushstroke, didn't it? And where was that in that painting, do you think? I don't know. Where did he start? Did he start in the middle? Did he start on the edge? Do you start with the sun? Do you start with a house? I'm not a painter, so I don't know these things. But I know that this painting started with one brush stroke somewhere. Somewhere he took that brush and he put it, and there was a start, wasn't there? And it was a start that eventually was going to become this piece of art, this work that is valued for so much money, this creation. It all started with that one brush stroke and another brush stroke and another brush stroke until you have this painting that's before you that's worth what it's worth. And as I thought about that, I thought about the art of motherhood. A mother has the ability to take this canvas, this blank canvas, this child, this unique creation, and this mother is going to place the first brush stroke on that child, the first teaching, the first learning, the first love, the first kiss, the first hug, the first of all these things that this child's going to experience is going to come originally from this mother and the influence that this mother has. Proverbs 1, it says, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck." The idea that a mother's teaching, that a mother's influence becomes so important in a child's life and in a person's life. And we live in a messed up world. And I hate that we do, but it's true, and you and I know it. And every time I preach a sermon like this, and every time I think about Mother's Day or Father's Day or all those other things, I know that everybody didn't have a great experience. I understand that. Everybody didn't have a great mother, or maybe they didn't have a great father. Maybe they didn't have a great childhood, and I hate that. Because I feel like God put mothers and fathers and family in our life to make us who He wants us to be. I think it's all part of this idea that God has to create us and mold us and to fashion us into the potential that we have in God's kingdom. And if you didn't experience that in your life, I'm sorry that you didn't, and I hope something in your life made up for that, because it's just hard to replace the love of a mother in a child's life. Maybe impossible to replace that. A good mother is more precious than anything a person can just about have in their entire existence. I think mothers love different than fathers. Me and Susie had this conversation, and I said, I think mothers love different than fathers. And she said, I don't know that I agree with you on that. I don't know that you love our children less than I do. And I said, I don't know that I love them less, but you love them different. And I think that's a powerful testimony to how God created us. I love my children. And my children are grown and out of the house, and the truth is I could go a week without talking to my kids, and I'd probably be okay with that. Maybe a couple weeks, I'd be all right. Not that I don't love them, I love talking to them, but I'd be okay. But my wife, if she doesn't talk to my kids every single day, it's a problem. She's going to do it one way or another. And if they don't answer, they know if you don't answer, we're probably going to drive to wherever they're at and knock on their door because she's going to check on them. It's just how she is. It's just different. And that's good. That's unique. That's how God created us. There was a man in the Bible by the name of Moses, and most of you all know Moses, but if you what sometimes we miss about him is, we always think, well, he was raised by Pharaoh's household, he was in the land of Midian. But one thing we miss about Moses is his mother. Do you know Jochebed was Moses' mother? Does everybody know that? And Amram was Moses' father. And what you might not know is that Jochebed and Amram, Jochebed was Amram's aunt. I don't know if you knew that or not. She was actually his aunt that had Moses. But interestingly, she wanted to save this child. That was the mother's love, but she said it was a beautiful child. I don't know exactly what that means, but she wanted to save it because all parents think their kids are beautiful, I think. And she wanted to save this child. And so she went to the trouble to make this basket, you know the story, to weave this basket and to cover it and to put him in the Nile to hope that he would be saved because he was certain to die. And then Pharaoh's daughter pulled him out of the water. You know the story. And she found one of the Hebrew children, which was Miriam, Moses' sister, and she said, find a Hebrew woman to nurse this child. So, of course, Miriam takes Moses right back to the mother who put him in the river, right, and says, raise this child. And if you read the text, it says that she raised him until he was weaned, right? Until he was weaned. And in our society, that generally means like a year, right? Generally means like a year. But in that society, to wean a child could be as much as 7 years old. So for the first 5 to 7 years of Moses' life, he was cared for and raised and nursed and nurtured by his mother. How did Moses know he was a Hebrew? Because of his mother. Because he was raised in that household. His identity was established. You know, years ago, there was a thing that the Roman Catholic Church always said. They said, give us your children till they're 5 and we'll have them their entire life. You know, a child is so influenced, even in their early years, by the interaction they have with the people around them, and influenced by the forces that surround them, and in God's eyes and in the family's eyes, that force, that influence is that mother who comes in and teaches that child and nurtures that child and makes that child into what they will grow up to be. If you have that child and you nurture that child and raise that child when they're young, you'll have them their entire life. Never underestimate the power of the hand who rocks the cradle. Because truthfully, as that song says, it can change the world. And sometimes we forget the power that a mother has in this world. You know, his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go ahead and call the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. And that short time that mother had Moses changed his life. It changed who he would become. You know, I often think of Samuel. You know, if you know the story of Samuel, Hannah and Elkanah, Hannah couldn't have children, and so Hannah goes to the temple, and Hannah prays to God. And Eli, the priest, he thought she was drunk, because she was moving, her lips were moving, but she wasn't saying anything. And Eli kind of chastised her because he thought she was drunk. And Hannah says, Eli, he says, no, I'm praying fervently to the Lord, praying so fervently to the Lord. And Eli says, I would that your prayer would be answered. And her prayer was that she would have a son. But in that prayer, she made a vow to the Lord, and she said, Lord, if you'll give me this son, if you'll open my womb and you'll give me this son, she goes, I'll dedicate him to the Lord all the years of his life. And so God opened Hannah's womb, and Hannah had a child, and that child's name was Samuel. And Samuel was raised in the temple, and Hannah, true to her vow, Hannah takes him back. Hannah did not go up, because it's one of those other situations. She was going to keep him until she nursed him. So 5 to 7 years old, Samuel would be in the house in the care and the arms of his mother. And Hannah did not go up to the temple while she was nursing him. But when the child is weaned, I will bring him so that he may appear before the Lord and stay there forever. This is such a tremendous story of faith and love. A mother who made a vow to the Lord who she loved to get a child who she loved, and she gave that child to the Lord. And she honored her vow. And she took him up and she left him with the priest Eli. Remain until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord confirm his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. But Hannah never forgot Samuel, because mothers never quit loving their children. Hannah never forgot Samuel. And the scripture says in 1 Samuel 2, Samuel's ministering before the Lord as a boy, wearing the linen ephod, and his mother would make him a little robe and bring it to him from year to year when she would come up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Hannah had other children, but Hannah was never going to forget Samuel, was she? Her love for Samuel, because a mother's love never, ever ends. Mothers never give up on their children. You know, I saw that in my life many times. People that I've given up on, that I thought, well, nothing good will ever come of them, you know. And I saw mothers that never, ever, ever gave up. They prayed for them, they nurtured them, they cared for them. They did everything they could, because a mother never gives up on the potential that their child possesses. I think mothers paint a picture in our lives. They're the first brush strokes that ever touched the canvas of my life. I don't know what they were. I think in my life and my family, those brush strokes were love and kindness and family and togetherness, things that I've carried throughout my entire life that I wish to pass on to my children, because I think those are things that are important. They hold us together as people, they hold us together as community, they hold us together as family, they hold us together in God's kingdom. Every brush stroke that's put upon the canvas of your life paints a picture that you will become. And many times, for most of us, that started with our mother. You know, I don't know how you view your life, how you view who you've become, but I hope that you think back this morning to your beginnings, to who you were, to where you started. You know, Mary, of all mothers in the Bible, we talk about Mary, don't we? Mary, the mother of Christ. I often ponder her, the young girl who conceived the Son of God, who gave birth to the Son of God in a manger in Bethlehem. I wonder about how she took all that in and what she thought it would be. And I think early on she thought it would be glorious to have the Son of God, didn't she? The King of Israel. She would be the mother. I don't think she knew what that meant, and I don't know that she could have understood it. In Luke 2:19, Mary treasured all these things. This is after the shepherds came to talk about Jesus' birth. And in Luke 2, it says, Mary treasured all these things, pondering them in her heart. You know, mothers keep things, don't they, from children that I don't think I would care that much about, but somewhere there's books in my house that have things like first teeth, first cut of hair, first fingernail clippings, first whatever. I don't know that means a tremendous amount to me as a husband and a man, but they were important to my wife. They were important to her as a mother, that she remembered the first of our children, the first that our kids ever did, the first brushstrokes that were ever painted upon their canvas, the first things. You know, I think when I think of my children, I don't think so much about the first. I think about the last time I was able to carry them on my shoulders, the last time that before they got married, the last day of their school. I don't know why, it's just different for me, I guess, but to her, those firsts are so important. Mary treasured these things, treasured them in her heart, remembered them. And at the last, I'm sure she thought, as Jesus was going through the things Jesus was going through and the trials that he would face, I wonder sometimes if Mary didn't think back to those days, to the early days, the days she held him as a little baby and raised him in that town of Nazareth, and he was like all the other little kids, doing the things that all the other little kids did, if Mary didn't think back to those days as she thought about Jesus. You know, John tells us at the end where Mary was, because a mother's love never ends. You know, I've often said, and I believe it's true, parents should never have to bury their children. And in this congregation, that's happened way too much. But Mary had to see Jesus, her son, crucified upon a cross, an innocent man crucified for something that he didn't do. And John really brings it to us, doesn't it? It says, John, standing by the cross of Jesus. You know, I think broke her heart. You know, how couldn't it? I think it's what a mother does. You know, a mother in your life, a good mother, they rejoice with the little things that you do, and they cry when you cry. They feel your joy. They feel your pain. They love you unconditionally. That's what a mother is in God's kingdom. You give your children faith. You maybe take them to church for the first time in their life. You nurture them and care for them, and you help them to grow, and you paint on their canvas the first strokes of the picture that will eventually be their life. As I thought about it this week and I thought about these things, I thought a mother is an artist painting on a blank canvas created by God to make that into the picture that God desires it to be. And that imagery just kept going over and over and over in my mind. I hope that you were blessed with a mother who turned you into a beautiful, beautiful picture. Because if she did, she's so proud of what you've become. You're unique. In all the universe, there's not another you, and there never will be. You're unique, and you're wonderful, and you're beautiful, and you're created by God. But God brought us into this world through the means of a mother and a father. In flesh we're conceived, but God places within us an immortal soul, an immortal spirit, in eternity that He places within our hearts. And when we look back at our life, I hope when you look back at the picture of your life, I hope it's a masterpiece. I hope you've painted everything in there that you desired your life to be. I hope that it's beautiful and magnificent and unique and wonderful. And I hope sometimes as you look back at it and you look at that picture, you think about who put the first brush strokes on your canvas. And I hope that you take time to tell them that you love them, that you're thankful for them, and that without them, you couldn't be who you are. Proverbs 21 says, she opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, her husband also, and he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. You know, mothers, all our young mothers, sometimes sit back and think that you're painting the picture of your child. And what do you want their picture to look like when it's done? I just think it's a neat way to look at life. I'm still painting on my picture. How about you? Mine's not done. I still got stuff to fill in, blank pages on my canvas, things that I want to do and accomplish and fulfill. And I want that canvas when I die, I want it to be full. And I want it to be perfect, and I want it to be unique. And I never, ever want to forget the people who painted the first strokes of the picture that I will become. If we can help you in any way this morning, won't you let it be known while we stand and sing.